We're moving right along. I think we're averaging about a half a chapter a week, although last week we only did a half a verse.
Are we still in Esther 5?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we finished half of verse 1.
Yeah, the third day.
Yep. Esther 5, verse 1. He says, on the third day, and then he's going to talk about the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house. Now he identifies it as the third day, and we talked all about how that identifies the second advent, when Jesus Christ comes back, and how the third day is the third millennia after he came to the earth for the first advent. In Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, Jesus Christ is not the king right now. A lot of people who want to claim him as king, however, he's not king yet. Zechariah 12, verse 10. One day he's going to come back and he'll return as a king. He'll be Jehovah God. Zechariah 12, verse 10. I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication, and they shall look. You know who this is talking about. They shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him, as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Okay, you know that's talking about Jesus Christ. He says, one day I'm going to come back and Israel's going to see me. And they're going to identify, oh yeah, it was us, the nation, who said, crucify him, let his blood be on us and on our children. They're going to see him with their eyes. Chapter 14, verse 9. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one. Okay? That's a simple definition of the number one. It's right there. That's God's name. One. Singular. That's the Trinity in all of its unity as one being. One. When Jesus Christ comes back, he restores Israel, the nation, and Jerusalem to their preeminence as over all of the earth. All nations will now answer to Israel. Jerusalem becomes the capital of the earth. That's going to happen one day, and that's what all of this stuff in Esther is going to picture. Jesus Christ is going to sit on the throne of David. In Zechariah 12, verse 6. The throne of David becomes God's throne, Jesus Christ's throne. Zechariah 12:6. In that day, that's a phrase you'll see all throughout the Bible. That day. It identifies millennium. In that day will I make the governors of Judah like an hearth of fire among wood, and like a torch of flame in the sheath. And they shall devour all the people around about on the right hand and on the left hand, and Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even Jerusalem. And the Lord also shall save the tents of Judah, first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day, there it is again, shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them. At that day, it is again, shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, and the angel of the Lord before them. That's future. It's what's coming. And you understand it just from reading it. You don't have to have any special knowledge to see that's future, because David's dead and gone. This is thousands of years after David. Well, it hasn't happened since. It's not been fulfilled, so it's still got to be future. In Revelation 1, verse 6, when Jesus Christ sits on the throne as God, ruling the earth, he suddenly has the ability to pick his own cabinet. He's going to pick his rulers. Revelation 1:6. And hath made us kings and priests unto God and his Father. To him be glory and dominion forever, forever and ever. Amen. So at that point, when he's ruling on the earth as a king, then we will be too. That's why Paul says over there, he says, you reigned as kings, and I would that you did. because there's a time that's going to happen, but it hadn't happened yet. When that happens, it'll be millennium, but it hadn't started yet. One day it will. There's a whole sect of people who try to say it's already started. That's the craziest thing. If this is the perfection of Jerusalem and Israel and the millennium, but yeah, I hate to see the bad news hit. In Isaiah 45, when he comes back, he establishes a new covenant with Israel. Isaiah 54, what did I tell you? 45. Well, that's a good one too, but we're not going to read it. Isaiah 54, verse 5. Isaiah 54, verse 5. Now, of course, this is talking to Israel, the nation, not church age. There's nobody here that's born again in this passage. They don't have a clue what that is. Nobody's been sanctified. Nobody's been washed in the blood of Jesus Christ. That's all future, and they don't even have a clue what that is, because the disciples didn't know either. Here he is, verse 5, Isaiah 54, verse 5. For thy Maker is thine husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. The God of the whole earth shall he be called. Earth, something physical you put your feet on. For the Lord hath called thee as a woman forsaken, and grieved in spirit, and a wife of youth, when thou wast refused, saith thy God. For a small moment have I forsaken thee. Wow, small moment, really? It's been 2,000 years. He says that's a small moment to me. That's how big he is. That's how long eternity is going to be. He says, for a small moment I have forsaken thee, but with great mercies will I gather thee. In a little wrath I hid my face from thee for a moment. But with everlasting kindness will I have mercy on thee, saith the Lord thy Redeemer. For this is as the waters of Noah unto me. For as I have sworn that the waters of Noah should no more go over the earth. Okay, so we understand what that is? It flooded the earth. The rainbow popped out. What's the rainbow stand for? It doesn't stand for LGBT, WXYZ. It stands for, I get mad sometimes. And when I do, destruction happens. And I've already used up this one enough. Next time around, it's going to be fire. It's not that I'm never going to destroy again. It's that I'm not going to do it this way. And, you know, it doesn't get better. When he destroys with fire, there ain't nothing left. When he destroyed with water, there was something left. Okay, so don't get so excited about the rainbow. It means worse is coming. So he says, just like I swore with that rainbow, that I'm not going to cover the earth with water again, and it's not happened yet. There have been areas that have been covered, but not the whole earth. In the same way, you should understand about Israel, the nation. So have I sworn that I would not be wroth with thee, the nation, nor rebuke thee. Well, he's been doing it for a long time. For the mountains shall depart and the hills be removed, but my kindness shall not depart from thee, neither shall the covenant of my peace be removed, saith the Lord, that hath mercy on thee. So it hasn't happened yet, so it's going to have to happen sometime for him to fulfill his word. Now, we believe the Bible means exactly what it says. So if you believe the Bible, you've got to believe that's future prophecy. Because right now, they don't have loving kindness and mercy from God. They've got wrath, and more on the way. But one day, this right here is going to be fulfilled. In Jeremiah 31, Jeremiah 31, verse 31. It helps to stutter because then you don't know if you get it right or wrong. 31:31. Jeremiah 31:31. Actually, really 31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel. Okay, so we've got to stop right there. A new covenant indicates there was an old covenant. So for us, we can't claim Israel's new covenant because we would have had to have had an old covenant. God didn't make an old covenant with us. We're a bunch of heathens. No covenant at all. So he can't make a new one with us. If he was going to make a covenant with us, it would be called the covenant. But here there's going to be a new one with the house of Israel. Oh, I thought he said Christians. No, the house of Israel. It's Jewish. Doesn't have anything to do with Christians nowadays. And with the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. Okay, how many of you came out of the land of Egypt by God's leading? How many of your ancestors did? 0. Okay, answered myself. Which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord. Okay, so we know some things here. God the Father has a bride, just like Jesus Christ has a bride. God the Father's bride is Israel, the nation. He claims them. He's the husband, they're the wife. And he said, I brought you out of Egypt, and I made a covenant with you. Yes, he did. First 5 books of the Bible, we understand what that covenant was. Here's my rules, my regulations. And they've broken them. Verse 33. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days. Okay, that's an important phrase. After those days. So that indicates there's going to be a time of limbo where they don't know. There's going to be a few days where I'm not going to make the covenant. But at some point I'm going to resume, and I'm going to make a second covenant with them. But in the meantime, they're going to be sitting in time out, those days. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts. This is the new covenant. And write in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. All of them. He's not offering salvation to them. He's immediately saving them. That's everywhere you find in the book of Psalms the seed being saved. David repeatedly talking about my seed's going to be great and my seed this and my seed that. We don't inherit salvation. I can't pass on righteousness to my children. That's an individual choice. But in the millennium, it won't be. Everybody who's born an Israelite becomes saved immediately. He writes his law in their heart. We'll keep reading and you'll see this clear. Where are we? Verse 35? 34. No, 34. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. What? No preaching in the millennium. Don't talk about, I need to tell you about Jesus. He says, don't do that. Why? He already wrote it in their hearts. It's in their mind. They already know it. If you preach it, you're going to be saying something that is new to them, that's not already written there. Let's keep reading. Saying, Know the Lord. For they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. Thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for the light by day, and the ordinance of moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea with the waves thereof roar, when the waves thereof roar. I cannot read tonight. The Lord of hosts is his name. Verse 36. He does this thing. He loves to give you an if, or, and, like we saw earlier. He said, my covenant, when I made a promise to Noah that it's not going to flood again, that's how serious I am about I'm going to make a covenant with Israel. He's going to do it again twice before we're done with this little passage. Verse 36. If these ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Okay, you want to think you've replaced Israel? Here's what you have to do. You have to eliminate the sun, the moon, and the stars. If you could do that, then God said, okay, then if you're big and powerful enough to do that, then God says, okay, I'll replace Israel. Otherwise, there's a covenant made, and Israel's going to be his people, period. Verse 37. Thus saith the Lord, if heaven above can be measured. Now, I can see people taking a challenge on that one, but it's never been found. Every time science thinks they found something, they wound up in a mirror looking backwards at themselves. It's bigger than we ever thought. It's growing. We don't have a clue what's out there. He says if you could measure it, so that tells you right there you're not going to be able to measure it. It's a waste of time. If heaven above can be measured and the fountains of the earth searched out beneath, that's that sea diving, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, saith the Lord. Okay, now we understand who Israel is from the Old Testament, a bunch of wicked sinners, just like us. Every time God said do something, they said no, sir. Every time he made up a rule, put it on them, they said let's tweak it a little bit and corrupt it. And he says right here, for all they have done. He's including all the iniquity they did. He said it doesn't matter. I'm going to forgive them for all they've done. Now that's the God we serve. That's a good God. Now, if I was in his place, it'd be tough stuff around here. Nobody would survive but me. Now, the Campbellites and the Catholics and the Charismatics and all of them want to say that Jesus Christ is ruling on the throne right now. Because if you do, it changes all the theology. Now, we can metaphorically say that he's our king and that one day he's going to be king, but you start hammering that too hard, you run into doctrinal issues. And I'm going to show you where it becomes a real issue. If he's sitting on his throne up in heaven right now, then that means he's reigning right now. And that means when it says earth, it doesn't really mean earth. It means anywhere he chooses. Well, our Bible in the Old Testament has plainly told us earth is where he's going to rule on the throne of David in Jerusalem. So if they say, okay, he's reigning right now, then that's still not the fulfillment, because he's got to be right where he says he's going to be. So then that means that his kingdom is established now. It's not established now. The increase of his kingdom, there will be no end. So they try to say that the kingdom is increasing. We're bringing in the kingdom. It's growing. It's fulfilling all of these millennial prophecies. But it's not. The closest thing we get to that thing, if you really believe that, then you have to become a Catholic. That's the only way to do it. If you really believe that the kingdom is set up now, Jesus Christ is on his throne ruling and reigning, then you've got to believe it's the Antichrist. Not the Antichrist. Well, maybe the Antichrist, but you got to believe in the Pope, because that's what the Pope claims to be doing. He's sitting in the place of Jesus Christ, and he rules over all of what he calls the Christians on the earth, which is exactly what Jesus says he's going to do. So it's blasphemy is what it is. Exactly what it is. He claims the title of Father. Well, God's a father. He says, if I be a father, where's my honor? And he doesn't rule over Christians. He rules over people he can confuse. Now, by saying that, I'm not saying all Catholics are doomed. I'm sure there's a lot of saved Catholics. It's easy to get saved. It's hard to get sanctified. They lived in that church, and God has probably protected a lot of their minds, so all they get are what they see out of the Bible and a few things, and they get saved. But if they don't get out of that Catholic church, they don't grow, because they'll get sucked into wrong teaching. He calls himself the chief bishop. No, sir, that's Jesus Christ. He's the bishop. Paul didn't have a throne. Peter didn't have a throne, even though they want to put him on one. No famous preacher you ever knew had a throne. Okay, it's not now. There's a kingdom coming, but right now it's spiritual. It's not physical. There's a physical one coming. And that's what we saw with Esther. There's a physical kingdom going on, and that's where the power is. There's power in that kingdom to put down and to kill at will. All believers are going to reign as, not all, I don't mean all, I shouldn't say all. The believers who qualify in the kingdom will reign as kings and priests. But you got to qualify for that one. He says, if you suffer with me, you also reign with me. If you deny me, then he's going to deny you. What's he going to deny you? Not salvation, that's eternal. But he'll deny you ruling and reigning. You'll be in timeout in the millennium. Now, I've covered that before, so we won't go into detail. Verse 2. Esther 5, verse 2. We've made it a whole verse. Esther 5, verse 2. We're flying. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. Remember, she had to go in, and she hadn't been called. She was going to go in there and risk her life. And she didn't know if this was going to work or not. Now, we get the idea because we read this with some American romance novel thing going in our head, that he's just so in love with her, of course he's going to, not necessarily, he got rid of Vashti. Furthermore, there was a whole kingdom full of beautiful women that had been locked up because they weren't chosen. Out of all of the women of the land, he chose Esther. The rest of them got locked up. They don't get to marry. They don't get to go home. They're locked away. Okay, he's not as nice as you think he is. This is a scary thing she's doing. So she walks in there and she gets favor. That's a good thing. The Bible says the king's heart is in the heart of the king is in the hands of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. This is probably what's going on here. God has overruled in this wicked king's life. Now, there's some good qualities about him, but there's a bunch of qualities that ain't so hot about him. He's a mean ruler. He's a heathen. He gives in to Esther, accepts her, welcomes her into the courtroom. That's a good thing. Now, for us, we get welcomed in too. We're accepted in the beloved. But for Esther, there wasn't any promise she would be accepted. For us, there is. He says, if you come to me, I'll in no wise cast you out. We can walk right in. We can accept it. However, for Esther, it was, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. The other time this happens is Cyrus. Cyrus makes a decree, remember in Ezra and Nehemiah, that all the Jews can go back. That's the weirdest thing. Why is a heathen king who has these people as his subjects and his slaves suddenly say, hey guys, y'all want to go free? Go ahead. You need any money? Let me know. I'll bring you some builders and we'll get this thing done. That's God moving in his heart, moving against him. The same thing happens in the tribulation. The devil thinks that he shows up in the tribulation and he's got things going the way he wants them to. I'll find you a verse in here somewhere in Revelation. When the devil shows up, he doesn't get to run the show like he thinks he's going to. The way that thing goes down is the way God set it up. Revelation. Yeah. Revelation 17. Revelation 17, verse 17. If ever there's a wicked king, a wicked ruler, it's the Antichrist. Hello? Okay, watch what happens. Revelation 17, 17. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will. He said, okay, I'm going to make you want something. You're going to want the same thing I do. And to agree to give their kingdoms unto the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. The tribulation is set up at God's doing, not the devil's. God's controlling that. Nothing moves without him doing it. He's saying there with Esther, hey, I let her come in and she was accepted. Well, it's for a bigger reason than herself. God knows what's going on and he knows what needs to happen, and he's orchestrating events. He's moving pieces around on the chessboard. I'm sure she didn't understand fully what was going to go, how this was going to go, but God did. He moved on the king's heart, be in a good mood today. Get you an extra shot down at Starbucks this morning. So when she comes in, in the New Testament, in 1 Timothy chapter 2, here's what a Christian is commanded to pray about our rulers. In 1 Timothy 2, verse 1 to 2, he says to pray for kings and for all that are in authority. Why? That we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. There's a reason that we pray for presidents and rulers and kings and those type of things. We don't pray for them to become the most righteous ruler there are. I mean, that would be great too. However, what we're supposed to be praying for right there is that we can live a quiet, godly, honest life. We don't understand that in America. But there's some countries, if you went to Iran right now, that prayer would suddenly mean something. They can't live an honest, godly life in public without fear of recrimination. Their authorities will come down on them for it. A Christian's never commanded to pray for world peace. That goes right against all the modern day philosophies, is that peace, peace, and, more peace on top of that. That's not what's going to happen. When Jesus Christ comes to give peace, he destroys the majority of the earth to do it. His peace process means a peace over here and a peace over there. So don't be praying for that. Okay, so when Esther walks in, he holds out to Esther the scepter, and that was in his hand. Remember, Esther didn't know for sure. God answered the prayers of the fasting Jews. Remember, she had told her, is it her uncle? No, it's not her uncle. It's her nephew. Her cousin. Mordecai. Not Mordecai. Yeah, Mordecai. I got too many names rolling around my head. To Mordecai, she said, go get all the Jews together and fast and pray. So, now it doesn't say that that's the reason he held out his scepter, but I would imagine there was some serious power from God going on right then. If a whole nation of his chosen people that he wanted to turn to him suddenly turned to him, then he's probably moving, and we can see it in the story. Verse 3. Esther 5, verse 3. Then said the king unto her, what wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be given thee to the half of the kingdom. Okay, I'll take that, if that's all you can give me. Now, that's a hyperbole. It's an exaggeration on purpose. It's a form of respect. He doesn't really mean I'm going to give you half the kingdom. Yeah, he's saying that, and she understands that he doesn't mean to give her half the kingdom. It's done as a way of exaggerating to show favor. You find this happens throughout the Bible. Solomon does something very similar. He tells his mom she wants to come in, and he says, yeah, come on in. I won't say anything. I won't say no to anything you request of me. And then she makes a request, and he says no. And kills the man. That's right. Okay, so that's not... The king does this. He exaggerates on purpose in order to show favor to an individual. It's not necessarily, I'm going to give you one half, period. You find it again when the spies go into Canaan. They say that the cities are walled up to heaven. How high is heaven? 1 inch off the ground? I mean, really, that's the first heaven. Oxygen is the first heaven. The second heaven is outer space. The third one is the throne of God. Okay, so first heaven is, an ant's in heaven too. because he stands off of the ground. Anything that's subterraneous is not in heaven. So they didn't really mean it as being it's all the way, their walls go all the way up to the throne of God. They're exaggerating on purpose to get a point across. And their point was taken. It worked. Yeah, king live forever. And they also said that the giants were that we were like grasshoppers, and they knew it. They knew we were grasshoppers. How do you know what they knew? Did you have a conversation with them? Did they tell you that? Really? No, they didn't mean that. They meant we're exaggerating, but this is how clear I'm trying to paint the picture for you. So it was intended to be an exaggeration, just to make it indelible in their mind, we're serious about this. The same way the king is doing. Let's see. The only time that this little phrase appears exactly like that is when Herod says it. The only other time Herod uses it. In Mark 6:22-23, I'm not going to read it to you, you know the story. But there, Herodias comes in and dances for him. And he says, it's your birthday, and I'll give you anything you want up to the half of the kingdom, my kingdom. The very same wording. Okay. So it's the same wording, except for there he does something different. He makes an oath. Okay, well, the king here in Esther is saying, whatever you want, I'll give you to the half of the kingdom. But he's not swearing an oath to it. Herod swears an oath to it. And rather than do what everybody expects that to just be an exaggeration, he should have said, oh, you picked the wrong side of the kingdom, honey. Right. He didn't do that. He said, oh, I'm going to look good if I tell this girl no now. I've got to give her something. Well, he could have said, well, do something within reason. You're going to find we're going to have to stop here in a minute. I realize how late it's gotten. But you're going to see here later on in the passage, Esther's going to say, if it pleases the king. Well, wait a minute. She shouldn't be worried about what pleases the king or not. He just said you can have up to half. So why is she worried about what pleases him? Okay, because she understands that's an exaggeration on purpose. Biblically, and I don't have time to get into it, we'll try it again next week. Biblically, we'll see answers to prayer are the same way. You'll find many times in the Bible where it says you can ask anything you want, and I'll give it to you. Really? Really? We can ask anything? It doesn't work that way. That's in hyperbole. And in the Bible, he's going to give you specifics on what he's talking about, and if you're within the rules, then that qualifies. Otherwise, it doesn't. And so we got to stop it there, or we'll go for another 5 hours. What? Yes. Mm-hmm.